said moderator for our session, but I don't know how she can be in two places at once. Also, I don't know how self-conscious you're feeling after that session we've just been to. I feel I'm a bit asymmetric at the moment, but just wait for me to deliver my messages, you know. So I'm Anna Salter. I've got a clicker. Yes, hang on. There we are. Oh. Here are your speakers today. Anna Salter, hi. Nice to meet you. Thank you very much for joining our session. And I'd like to introduce and thank Raj Kumar for coming over from London with me to speak to us all today. So that's our introduction of us. I'm just going to say a little bit about what we're going to do today. We've been working with Aviva for quite a few years now on listening in all of the voices, all of the different stakeholders that they have as an organisation. And we're going to talk about that project. Start off by talking about the ask, what Aviva approached us to ask for, what they needed to know, how we implemented the project, and then we're going to think about what the insights were and the impact on the organisation, and finally what the future holds, I think, for the project and in general. So first of all, I'm going to ask Raj to go straight into the ask.
Thank you, Anna. Actually, just before that, it's something that I was reminded with all the talk about the eyebrows. I went to a boarding school where, for fun, the boys' boarding school, where for fun we'd dab hair removal cream on eyebrows while people slept. And when you washed your face in the morning, your eyebrows would fall out.
Okay.
It was amazing. You really didn't know what the hell the chap was thinking about afterwards.
A 10-year stag night, I think that sounds like.
So yeah, that reminded me of that. But anyway, moving on from eyebrows. So Aviva, a little bit for all of you who probably do not know about Aviva. We are the largest insurance, wealth management, retirement solutions provider in the UK. We have about 18.5 million customers across UK, Ireland, and Canada. But our home market and leading market is the UK and India, actually. What we wanted to think about was turn sort of reputation and reputation intelligence on its head. In financial services, what we usually have is a whole lot of risk people talking about reputation risk. And then there were loads of processes around it. Then there are loads of people around it. There's loads of things to what to do if one of those risks comes to fruition. There's lots of horizon scanning around risk. And for me, it's like reputation, you know, it's all about protection, you know, and financial services don't need to protect, they need to build their bloody reputations, you know. It's gone through the mud a bit. And for me, protecting reputation is like holding water. It'll keep on getting less. So we wanted to turn that on its head and talk about building a reputation, talk about growth, and talk about what is the reputation we want to actually build. So more than getting great press coverage, which everybody's happy about and you show, and then you don't get great press coverage and people are pissed off about it. But you go, let's talk about, are we building what we set out to build? And can we do that objectively? So that was the thing. And our ask was sort of three things. We wanted to be the go-to brand. And what does that mean? That means when you think about the category, you think about the brand at the top level of a basket of brands. So if you think about sportswear, you might think about Adidas, but maybe Nike is on top. If you think about recycling or sustainability, maybe Patagonia is on the top. So what are the things that matter to us and where did we want to be a go-to brand? So that was one. So when you think of that category, Aviva pops up as number one. Second, we needed a barometer of success, which was objective. And you know, like we all have those times when we're launching something new and it goes, and somebody, C-suite asks you, how did it go? And there's a little paragraph, which is either your opinion or the agency's opinion on how it went, followed by about 70 articles that came out. And you go, that's bollocks, actually. Do you know, anybody could write that. How do I objectively know what's happening? So that was the second thing. And the third, very importantly, Aviva as a financial services provider sort of deals in promises. So the promise is that you have an insurance product that will pay out if something happens. You have a retirement product, so you retire in 30 years. And hopefully it'll be a good retirement because of what we did with your money. More importantly, that we survive, so we're still there as a company for 30 years. And then finally, about investments. Again, that we're a good custodian and guardian. So we wanted to build our reputation in these three areas. So that was the ask. Thank you, Anna. So we set out, as we do in these big companies with RFPs, and bless you. And what we were looking for was one thing that I've already mentioned, the indisputable and granular insights. Now, one thing about insights that we've seen a lot, I've seen a lot, is that it's not really a democracy in that sense. What a lot of people are talking, I already know about. And I didn't want something that just tells me what thousands of people are thinking about. I wanted something that also goes down to the minutiae. It talks about, because those eureka moments, those real critical comments come from one person. Those real insights come once. If everybody had those great insights, we'd all be startup gurus. We're not. So for me, it was something that could go to that one, but also was scalable to 1,000 or 10,000, whatever. So that was one. Capture Aviva's performance across stakeholders. As you all know, different stakeholders value very different things, have very different opinions about a company. And sometimes they're completely divergent. So what shareholders want, what our customers want, what our NGOs want, everything is different. And we wanted to choose which stakeholders, and I'll come on to that later, and how. I've already mentioned building a reputation rather than just generating positive comment. And you got all these pet projects of all these big senior people, and you go, I want this taken out, please, to the market. And you go, why? And they go, it's a nice, good, great thing. And you go, but yeah, but in the overall sense, what we're building, this isn't really that important. I'm going to put my resource over there. And those are difficult conversations, because a lot of these people have a lot of very strong pet projects. Focus on special occasions. So as a publicly traded company, we have lots of special occasions, quarterly results, half-yearly, annual results, new sustainability policy, CEO change, etc., whatever. A lot of these things come by. And often what happens is we went, case by case. What we wanted was a bank of learning. What messages were landing, what were confusing, what wasn't landing at all, things like that, in our big financial corporate strategy statements as well. And finally, and this is really important, I've learned something, really important, fifth point, we wanted to balance the AI and the human. So we wanted the advantages of AI, which could ingest like billions of bits of data. But the AI could tell us what is positive, what is neutral, what is sort of negative. What we wanted was a human oversight from someone who knew the industry, who has that eye when they look at something to say, that's not just positive, neutral, or negative. That's a great story right there. Or that's something that these guys at Aviva can really run with. So we wanted human oversight, besides having the big AI. And I'll hand over to Anna.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about how we took this brief and made it into a framework, essentially. So the first question was about this granular brief in order to getting a granular view of the data and then being able to roll it up to a single view of the truth across the whole organisation. And that was obviously about applying a consistent framework, but it was also about listening in on what lots of different groups were talking about, but being able to apply that to the overall view of the organisation. And so that was really about how Aviva was performing across all of the different voices which make up their reputation overall. So those stakeholders could be politicians and policymakers, they could be the general public, they could be tier one journalists, they could be the regulator, they could be customers. So we were listening on all of those things, and then we set up a like-for-like study to look at what was being said about competitors as well, to give us that granular level, but also the ability to roll up to a top line of the overall 360 view of reputation. Now, it wasn't only about who was talking and what the sentiment was, it was how meaningful was what they were saying about the organisation. Were there any signals in there, any messages which were improving or giving the opportunity to improve people's understanding of the brand and what it stands for? Or were there areas where maybe customers or other stakeholders had misunderstood what Aviva was trying to do? So we were able to pick those kind of signals up with this very granular view. So that messaging could be driven by campaigns, it could be driven by events, or it could be undermined by events and issues. So that's something that we built a whole research ecosystem to be able to pick that stuff up. And this balance between AI and human insights is really important. As Raj says, the AI is great at picking up the wider issues and the signals, but you really need a human being to curate and derive insights from that, because AI is great at being able to find, select, filter data, surface issues, etc. But to really understand whether that's accurate or not, you need a human brain. So first of all, could you give us an example of some insights or some issues that have emerged from this that possibly you might not have known about without this study?
Yeah, I think loads of them, especially across the pandemic. This was really for us why we were ahead of the curve when it came across the pandemic. So the first questions we started seeing, first people asking questions was about things like, oh, I'm starting to work from home now. What about my insurance coverage for that? Does it affect my home insurance, etc.? So things like that. We also had people going, oh, care workers, could we do something for them? And we did. We also had things about a lot of questions on people's pensions. Because if you remember the stock market, well, pretty much like now, but at that time was also just going off. People wanted advice on that. We also had things about sort of premium payments being delayed or being written off. So we were actually ahead of the curve because we were seeing these conversations happen much before anybody else was, because of the system, because it was so granular. So things like that, things on the environment, we picked up quite a bit. Coal was something that we now talk about, but we picked it up as an early warning system way before. So for us, a lot of things get picked up because we get to see this data very in real minutiae. We get data files, which I'll talk about later, but yeah, it's really good.
Yeah, great, thank you. Yeah, so one of the things is that, you know, the minutiae, as Raj puts it, perhaps you'll pick up some smaller signals that keep coming up month on month on month. By the end of the year, actually, that's made it into your top 5 of issues, which you might not have seen if you'd only been looking for the big noises. And as I said, this is something that we've replicated those stakeholder groups, those audiences, across competitors as well. So we're able to benchmark Aviva's performance by stakeholder group and at top level. And so to just give you an example there on maybe the second competitor that you can see there, they've done a really good job of reaching out to their tier 1 journalists. Perhaps politicians are happy with them. The general public are reflecting back positively towards them. But they've got a lot more work to do with their customers, for example. Great. So one of the other things that Raj mentioned is actually looking at the impact of events on what's happening. So, you know, here you can see we are benchmarking Aviva against the whole industry, and you can see the peaks and troughs, and obviously you can overlay, you know, what happened when. So how have you built this into your event planning, this program?
Yeah, it's completely embedded now. So you'll see short term on the top part of it, it's short term. So we also know, sort of keep a finger on the pulse. It's like, what's the zeitgeist out there? What do we know about what's happening, what people care about? And we'll see spikes from competitor stories also even go, oh, we shouldn't really be touching that at all, for example. And then over the long term, what we like to do is see, we now actually have trended data. We actually know what is landing and what is not landing. So previous to every sort of quarterly review or strategic review, we look back at all that data and say, all right, we're building a story, we're building a narrative around One Aviva, we're building a narrative around sustainability, we're building a narrative around inclusive policies. Aviva was the first, and I think still probably the only one to have equal parental leave for men and women. So things like that, where we are seeing us really land what we're setting out to do, about corporate strategy, about inclusiveness, about sustainability. And we're building that, and we're seeing fruits of it. So, you know, in the previous slide you saw, I think we're about 86% overall positive sentiment. 10% neutral and something negative. And what that's driving is, it's not just overall positivity, it's driving it in topics we want to be driven in. And that's the key for us. Just having positivity to show to your boss doesn't really cut it. It is, are you building that reputation you want to build? And that's key over here.
Yeah, thanks. So we've mentioned that we're segmenting the content according to who's talking rather than which channel it appears in. So how have you identified and decided which stakeholder groups you want to look at? And also, we weight these stakeholder groups, so that's a question as well. I mean, how did you decide which was more important, choosing between your favourite, which is your favourite child, essentially?
This is a really tricky question. And to be honest, we involved all our ExCo in this because we wanted everybody from our ExCo to be absolutely on board with it. Because somebody would stand up and say, why don't you have those? And you'd go, oh. So we wanted to make sure that everybody understood which stakeholders we were going to measure. We also wanted them to understand that comms and brand and all cannot take responsibility for everybody out there. We'll influence and talk about certain stakeholders and we'll measure them. Sure, we'll measure this one over here if we want us to, but that's not our gig. Ask the sales guys to look at that one. So for us, it was quite important that we agreed that for the comms team to look at the reputation we were building, that we talk about stakeholders we think we had influence on. The second big discussion we had was sort of downweighting customer. which is always a tricky one because we're all customer-centric at the end of the day. And so for us, customer, as you might know, for big public companies, when you're sort of scraping the open web for whatever data, 99% of customer comments would be either complaints or service triage. So if we only took that, we'd come across as one of the worst companies, and actually the whole industry would. So one of the future steps, which I'll talk about later, is combining that with other data that we have and how we could give a holistic picture. So over here, we weighted, for example, media much higher because it influences all the other stakeholders more. So we knew that. We also know, for example, on the kind of titles. So Onclusive know the titles we also care about a little bit more than others, both nationally and regionally. They also know the journalists, individual journalists or individual intermediaries, the brokers through whom we sell. So we have a list of all of those prioritized and go, these guys and girls matter more to us than them. And we sort of fiddle with it a bit for the first year as we got our weightings right. But ultimately, who goes into the weighting? So which stakeholders? Second thing was what we're going to be doing with each of these. And thirdly, we wanted stock. The EXCO really helped because we wanted stock sort of responses. Stock is a bad word. We wanted definitely agreed responses on good causes. Because the last 2 years, especially, we've seen a lot of good causes come out and call the morality of a company. And we're all hopping like cats on a hot tin roof. What we want to be sure of is there are some causes for which we will actively support. So whether it is diversity, inclusion, Black Lives Matter, Me Too, etc., we will actively support. There are other causes where we would be in solidarity, but we're probably not putting money behind. And there are yet others where we'd go, we don't know enough about that to comment or have a stance. So for us, it was also really important because we didn't want stakeholders like the media or other NGOs or politics sort of dictating us. So we wanted a stance on each of those stakeholders about what we wanted to build, but also to know where we would react and won't react, which is really important.
Great, thank you. Yeah, so just to talk a little bit more about what goes on behind the scenes here, you know, we've built up a view by all of these different stakeholders on what they're talking about, what the sentiment of what they're talking about, how important they are in context, all run through this sort of weighting system that Raj has described. And so essentially, by the end of each year, we've got an idea of, you know, what was the most positive topic across all stakeholders and what was the least positive topic across all stakeholders. And also it helps us understand which kind of events and which kind of messages are landing better or worse with those different groups. And essentially what we now have is a big library of events or types of events, so we can understand and predict how different things are going to land with those stakeholders. And I know a lot of PR people say to us, oh, well, that's just gut feeling. I know how things are going to land. But sometimes having something like this, which has got some science behind it and some evidence behind it, first of all, it's very accurate. Things tend to come out the way we said they're going to come out. And secondly, it gives them some science to be able to take it back to their business and say, guys, look, this is actually, we know this is probably going to be a problem because it's always been a problem in the past. So how do you feed this into comms planning? I mean, you've said it's been embedded in the events, getting ready for specific events, but have you done anything different as a result?
Yeah. So one thing is I work in a company full of actuaries, so giving them any data is amazing. They'll go through it and they love it, so which is always helpful. How we actually look at it is we get all the data files from Onclusive. We get it. And what I really love is it goes through the whole comms team. And they all go into it really literally line by line. They all want to look at what their particular campaign that they were working on or their topic, how it's performing and what's happening and what they could do better. So we have our monthly comms leadership team meetings. They're discussed over there. Quarterly I take it to the board. So the board are interested in it because not for the short term things that spike up and down, but definitely for the long term. How are we actually doing? Do people understand our corporate strategy, what's landed? Do people understand sustainability? Do people understand our gender balance? Do people understand our D&I initiatives? And all of those really key to going, yeah, our strategy's been understood. The things we're doing and we want to be famous for, that's what we're going to be famous for. And very few people can say that because when we look at the competitors, like we do in this case, you see quite a haphazard thing about competitors, which also is quite interesting to see is anybody actually making a concerted effort to build a reputation in one particular area, or are they just throwing stuff out?
Great. And then just a final shout out for the whole human part here. If you've got your the client comms team going through your work line by line, and we literally mean data line by data line in some cases,
It is.
you use human beings to do that coding, I can tell you. Okay, so I'm going to ask Raj to talk a little bit about the impact of this on the organisation, please.
I've already talked about the net positive, so we've really gone up ahead and claimed where we wanted to claim that ground. So there we go, in topics we wanted to be in. We have actions informed by insight, which is always helpful. So we have the gut feeling, but we also have a treasure trove of data going back a few years, 4 years now. So we've got that. Early warning systems, which I've again spoken about, so we can think about the risks, but we can also think about great ideas that come for campaigns and what people are worried about, what is affecting our customers' lives, and what we could do about it. So again, continuous improvements, and this is really important because what I see in the future is, can we tie this into something for our marketing with our customer segmentation, for example? So imagine if you knew these are your highest customer lifetime value segment is A, and these are the topics that they really are interested in, and that's what they really like. And that connection goes directly to business, because I could see that. Because ultimately, if we're appealing to that segment and it's working on one level or the other, what we'll see is higher retention, higher cross-sell, or just higher sales in lookalikes. So we don't need to find them out. We could match them in our own database. So that's something for the future we're looking on. And really delivering on the promises we're making. So that's it, I think, for us.
Yeah, great. And we just wanted to talk a little bit about the future, how you see this developing as we move forward into 22, 23.
Yeah, like I said, the customer one is a big one. We'd also probably like to see more of the NGOs and sort of causes, and what really is, I think, purpose-led companies that we talk about. I know it's a bit tricky to talk about these things, but we really are like that, and we want to see what is aligned to our purpose and how we could figure out whether it's actually landing or not, and people recognize that as such or not. So there are ways in which we want to integrate this data into our existing data, which will take some time.
Yeah, cool, thank you. And so the future facing, I mean, I've already asked Raj to say a couple of things about that, about integrating other data sets. But I just want to say, in terms of the use of automation, it's something we use more and more, obviously for data visualization, for finding content, for sorting it, etc. And I think I've made it quite clear already that our position here is really that, yes, we think that automation really adds value because it allows you to start looking at much longer periods of data, much bigger data sets, maybe more geographical areas as well. It can drive out some cost, but what it can't do is replace that sort of really granular level of insight. And we think there's still quite a big journey for this industry, that it can add value, but at the moment it hasn't really matured in terms of the amount of value that automation can add, because it's really been used so far as a way of increasing efficiency rather than enhancing value. So we think that's going to be the next step, really, is that we still need that human curation, we still need that human insight, and automation is going to be there to support that, really, rather than replacing it. So we've still got somewhere to go on that as an industry, I think.
I agree. I think going completely on one side, this is not a tool which we use to go and tell our bosses at the end of the day, look how good we've done, and look how much positive sentiment we've got. It really doesn't matter. It is, but have you built it in A, B, C, D, E? And I keep coming back to that. If you're not building in the areas you want to build in, then you're not succeeding.
Yep. And I think that's everything from us, except for Q&A. If anybody would like to ask us some questions, please. Hi, yes, go ahead. I don't know if we've got... Give us a shout.
Here you go.
Thank you, that was fascinating. I guess a question for both of you around, I guess, when you went into the project and obviously getting into so much detail, Raj, from your point of view and from your internal stakeholders, what was the level of willingness to hear the bad news about reputation? And how did you manage that internally? And I guess for Anna, what were the lessons that you got from that in terms of speaking to other clients about, I guess, having that honest conversation about, well, we're going to give you all this stuff, but you may not like everything. And how do you manage that with clients?
Do you want that back?
that. Good question. When we first started out, actually, I didn't have that kind of pushback. It was simply because we turned it on its head and said, we don't know how we performed today. How could you say we are good or bad? It's a completely gut feel on whether the CEO or CFO or somebody had read the Times today or maybe read the Telegraph day for yesterday. And that day they're not happy about Aviva. So what we said is, let's do a benchmark. Let's see where we are today. And it really doesn't matter where we are today, because you're not here for today or the past. We can't change that. Whatever you have in your closet, you already do. What we want to make sure is that we're starting with that benchmark. From today, we're going to start improving. So the willingness to understand is what we started off with. And that's how we sort of positioned it with all our exco, is this is where we start today, however bad or good it is. And let's build up for tomorrow.
Thank you. Great question. Yes, and I'm sure everybody will recognise this in the room, that, you know, some clients are still at a stage in their journey when they only really want to hear about, you know, the tick PR evaluation. I know that Richard's been having this battle for many years about AVEs, etc. You know, I think that clients who are interested in this kind of study are operating at a higher level already. They want to know about reputation and they're not frightened of hearing it. I think what they do need, though, in order to be able to get up to this sort of higher order of thinking, if you like, you need to meet that lower need as well. You need to be able to help clients understand, you know, were the outputs as good as they could be? Was my PR effort as good as it could have been? And you build this on top of it, because this takes that to the next level, and it helps you understand, helps a client understand, yes, we're going to showcase our work, but also what does that feed into? It's that kind of single version of the truth question that Aviva asked us right at the beginning. You know, PR is part of an ecosystem, and all of the departments have got a stake in reputation overall. And so I think being able to move beyond that pure marking people's homework piece is something that we were really being asked for in this case, which was refreshing. And I do sometimes play that back to clients, not quite in so many words and possibly slightly more tactfully, but to say, look, it's not just about that single campaign, and it's an education piece, I think.
Hi, thank you. Have you done any research that shows what a better reputation drives more sales, or like if you can improve reputation by X%, you will also get a higher amount of customers or something like that?
It's a holy grail, isn't it?
Yeah. That's
We're
what
all
you
trying to
always
find
want to
it.
go to.
Yeah, we already tried to find it. I think two things. This question was definitely asked and discussed at the Exco. I didn't have an answer at that time, and I said could we flip that? Would you rather have a bad one? And what does that do for you? So that was one. Secondly, yes, that is in the future, but it's really, really, really difficult. Not in the measurement, because I feel that you can measure it, but the time period is quite large, and it's probably larger than any CEO or any executive's tenure. So you want to see a good reputation, you're probably building it for your next successor. So you're building on that legacy. You're leaving it in better hands than when you found it in. So you could probably see it in 5-6 years, but probably neither me or the CEO or whoever started it would be there. But so for me, it's a measurement of time, because even customers leaving, joining, I mean, we're an insurer. You can only join once a year. If you're a pension customer, you're here for life. I mean, you can't even go away in that sense. So we see it in different forms, but it has to be in the thinking of it. Like I said, you know, we could see them buying more from us, but that data has to be sort of correlated through. We haven't done it as yet.
Yeah, thanks. And I think that sort of halo effect of having a decent reputation or a terrible reputation, it helps people on their buying journey. It gives them the context in which they might consider a brand. And I think we would all agree with that. And having hard data, you know, there is hard data out there to say that, you know, how important reputation is within the buying process. But it's very sector by sector. And we all know that a reputation can be overturned overnight. So I think, for me, I think what we help clients with is showing that consistent journey and consistency of voice, being able to speak to all of these different groups, give them the same message consistently and make that message as good as it can be, while we wait for the data to catch up with us, I think, in terms of understanding exactly what reputation is bringing to the party or detracting from your sales.
And you can see it in the UK. We've got some companies who were really hit by what we call the business interruption claims. Sorry. And I said you could see that in the UK in particular, we've had a few companies which have been hit by business interruption claims. That means claims by small businesses because they've been hit by the pandemic. And you see the bad reputation, and you can see it on their bottom line. You could see it in their executive turnover. You can see it in their profitability. So the opposite is definitely true, which sort of brings it to life.
Yeah, Philip from Onclusive. Raj, Anna, thank you so much. There's a lot of data that comes out of this, and Raj, how much does it impact in terms of, I'm asking about the tension between tactically what you do now and remain on track strategically for this long-term overarching goal. So there'll be a lot of coming out about who, you know, themes to engage on, people to talk to this week, this month, but you've still got this overarching strategic goal. Was there ever a tension in terms of how you resource things and where you put your focus?
Good question. There is a tension always. I think you could be tactically driven and land up nowhere, which is what was happening previously. But we now have that, I would say, a good tension and a good balance between tactical and sort of strategic. A few tactical things might end up being strategic, and vice versa also, which is a bit weird, but it does happen like that. But I guess what you're talking about is being reactive to what's happening immediately. And in the social sort of media world, definitely. What we do is there are sections which are reacting. And there's a part of the team that is built only to react. They're sort of, we call them a digital response unit, DRU. But we have a response unit there which will react immediately to stuff which is happening out there. And then we have the overall arching strategic stuff, which is sort of more planned, I would say. The difference between that is one is planned and one is unplanned, obviously. The planning stuff goes and keeps on going on its own, but we would look at whatever's unplanned and see whether we could turn it around.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No, in the absence of Johna, so just say, Raj, Anna, thank you so much for your time. A great session.